In a world of desolation, hopelessness, and fear, I created a deck that made sense. But it is not this day. No, I'm joking. This deck did make sense, but I'm going to try to explain kind of the logic behind what is a deck, how to make a deck, why to make a deck, what you're trying to do when you're making a deck, what you should be thinking about when you make a deck. A new player just scrambles a bunch of cards that seem like they might make sense, and maybe they don't even make sense. They just put cards together. But like, there's some things that you need to be thinking about. One of those things is how are you going to handle Site 5? Because you have a Balrog. It's probably going to be played on you. Because they can play it on you for free 99.999% of the time. They will have the ability to play the Balrog on you, and maybe they will choose not to because they chose not to for some reason. And probably they were able to pull something that's even scarier than the Balrog. But you need to be able to handle at least the Balrog. So how are you going to be able to handle the Balrog? Please do not have it be Legolas and Arwen die. That was me when I was at the beginning, when I had made elf decks and didn't know what I was doing, and also didn't have access to all of the rare cards. My solution to the Balrog was just Arwen and Legolas dying. No, please no. Don't do that. And every single companion in the game, except for one, Boromir, we'll pull him up here. One version of Boromir can handle the Balrog. This guy, he can handle the Balrog and not die for one skirmish. He's the only companion in the game without any buffs, without any upgrades, can do that. So he is a Balrog solution. He's not necessarily the one you have to have. In fact, this deck that I have doesn't have him in it. Some versions did, but I decided not to. So you want to be able to handle Balrog. That's one of the things you have to be able to do. I'll explain how this deck does it. I start with Legolas, I start with Merry, I start with Pippin. I normally bet 4. I start with Prancing Pony. This is a fancy version of it, but it's a Prancing Pony. And I got that from winning a tournament. I get these 4 people start with, then I pulled Prancing Pony out with Aragorn. I bet 4, removed 1 with Pippin, then add 1 with Aragorn. You never want to have 5 or more burdens because Inquea will eat you for breakfast. So that's just the plan with this deck. And then I have all 5 of these companions. And then just at the beginning, if I drew nothing else ever, I can handle the Balrog. It's pretty expensive. Merry exerts twice. To make either Aragorn or Legolas strong enough, you got to be at least a 9 strength. So 3 plus 9, 6 is 9. And that's not getting overwhelmed by the Balrog, unless they put Dark Places or something in there. But then I got Aragorn that could take it. And then that's 2 wounds on Merry, 2 wounds on Aragorn. And then normally I do end up having Pippin die. And that's not going to ruin my life because basically the plan of this deck is to eventually have Pippin die. Most of the time, Pippin's going to die. It's not having Aragorn die or Legolas, who are actually important, and it's not having Merry, who can exert to make Aragorn kill stuff better. So that's a Balrog solution, but it's not the only one that you have. Like, I like this deck because it's weird and unique. Like, I don't think I know of any other person that has a 5 companion deck that consists of Frodo, Merry, Pippin, Legolas, and Aragorn. I don't think anyone's ever done that I've ever seen or noticed. Which is one reason why I like this deck, because it's really weird. It uses 4 of these. This is pretty rare. I have seen it a little bit in pipe decks and a Elven Tail. There's a way of playing Elven Tails that remove burdens that does stuff like this. But I've messed with this for a while, being like, this is a super overpowered card. Which will get to the next thing of what you want in a deck. Not necessarily the next in terms of importance. These are just, you can debate which ones are most important. This might actually be one of the less important ones, but it's healing. You want to have the ability to heal. And even if your deck has no cards that make you heal, you still need to have a strategy that is, how am I going to heal? So most of the time, you want to make it from site 1 to site 3. And if you have no cards that heal you, you need to be able to make it from site 1 to site 3. You got to do that. The main exception is if you're going against Nazgul, you might die if you do that. But if you're not going against Nazgul, you should make it to site 3. And then, saying back on that topic of if you have no healing cards, well, what is my site 3? It allows me to get +1 movement, which means that I can get to site 6 if I have to. Go 4, 5, 6. Rarely does that ever happen because these two sites are often the hardest. But it's possible. And if I'm able to go from site 3 to site 6, then I can stop at site 6 and I can heal at site 6 because that's a sanctuary. I can heal at site 3 because that's a sanctuary. So that's a thing to think about. Or you have cards in your deck that allow you to heal, which means that you can go from site 1 to site 3, from site 3 to site 5, and if you need to, go from site 5 to site 7, because this is a race. Most of the time, the game wins by the Fellowship, getting to site 9. And it's who can get there faster. And if you move too fast, sometimes you can die, but you're very rarely going to die by moving from 1 to 2, then stopping, then 2 to 3, then stopping, then 3 to 4, then stopping. Everyone moves 1 every time, unless your Fellowship is comedically bad, you're gonna be fine. So it's the question of, am I gonna move once or twice, or am I gonna pull some weird shenanigan like this site to move 3 times? And if you're moving 4 times, I mean, that's possible. You could try to figure out what the mathematical fastest way to move is. It's probably possible to move from site 1 to site 9. I have to think about it, but there's a site 2 that makes it +1, site 3 that makes it +1. There's a Gandalf card that makes it +1. You could probably play 4 of those. That's +6. So you're already making it to site 7? Or no, that's +6. And it's normally 2, so I think that already gets you to site 9. Now I want to see a meme deck that does this, but point is, you want to be thinking about these things when you're making your deck. The other thing that's probably more important than healing, and maybe even more important than how you handle the Balrog, is how you're moving from more than once every time. How are you going to site 3 from site 1? How are you moving twice? Normally that involves winning skirmishes. But it doesn't actually have to necessarily mean winning skirmishes. It means making the enemies die and disappear so that you don't have to fight them again when you move a second time. And that could be with archery shenanigans, like Legolas can exert to kill guys or wound them, and then Aragorn's bow can do the same thing. And having both of those, even if you're not exerting, you've got 2 archery wounds that are damaging the guys that are coming at you, so there's less health on them, so eventually you'll be able to kill them. And then you win skirmishes, you do more damage. Another way is having damage +1. So one example of that is Aragorn's sword, even to a lesser degree Flaming Brand, because it makes you kill Nazgul better. And dwarves are great at getting damage plus stuff. They like to fight and win the skirmishes and beat you with the damage +1s. Elves like to kill you in the archery phase. So my brother likes to make memes about losing skirmishes just for elves. Fighting skirmishes is for dwarves. Elves don't even need to get to the skirmish phase because you can't get to the skirmish phase because you died in archery because they use bows. It's like a guy with a sword being like, I can sword fight better. And then David shows up with a sling and throws that at Goliath and kills him from a distance. And Goliath's like, but I had a sword, I want you to come up in my face. And it's like, nah, fam, I'm just going to kill you with a stone. That's how elves are. It's a completely different concept, a different way of playing, a completely different strategy. Not to say one is better or worse than the other. They have their different places. And often elves is compared with Aragorn, especially specifically because he also has the ability to do ranged. And with Gondor Bowman, like Aragorn is the best companion. Like you can make arguments for Gimli and Glowin if you buff Aragorn to like base strengths without having to play events. Then you can get Aragorn to a 14. And you can get Glowin. He'd be a 9 plus 3 plus another 3 is whatever that is. 15, I think. I think Glowin has the maximum potential without exertions, and then Gimli can get way more with exertions. But it's less cards to get Aragorn that way, and it's just easier. And when Aragorn's buffed, he not only does I'm stronger than you, not only does I do extra damage on you, but he's also an archer, which means that he can handle more than one man. Like Glowin can delete a single man. Aragorn can delete a single man and delete your army because he just exerted 3 or 4 times if he has till whatever this is called, the Saga of Elendil, and then he's the best companion in the game. Not only that, but this version of him only costs 2 Twilight. And if you have him at the beginning of the game, he's going to net you negative. He costs negative Twilight. Which is just busted. There's a reason why he's banned in Two Towers because he's busted. Like it's just he's way too good. And then you get the Aragorn package where you get Last Alliance Men and Elves. You get 3 elves. They can be allies, and then it's +3, so he's at 11. Then this makes him +2 more, 13, 14. And that's a 14 and a 16 damage +2 against Nazgul. Which is suddenly like you're doing 3 damage to the Witch King without having to play anything. Also, if they just played the Witch King and you got Aragorn's bow, you did a wound there. Like he's crazy. I went on a tangent on how good Aragorn is, but he's able to do the I win skirmishes, and he also does this other thing of Twilight Denial. So there's another thing you want to be thinking about because, like my brother likes to say, the whole game is about Twilight Denial. It's about being able to do more than what they're able to put on you. Like if you're giving them 0 Twilight every single time, which is impossible, but if you were able to give them 0 Twilight, you could just move 2 every time because they can play nothing on you. So it doesn't matter if you only have Frodo. If they have no Twilight, but they're always going to have Twilight. But like, you want to think about that. And Aragorn allows it where you can get your stuff out like regularly, and it's 2 less Twilight. It's just every single part of the game. And he's good at handling the Balrog, because if you put any possession on him, then suddenly he's strong enough to handle the Balrog with a fight. If you put armor, he can handle the Balrog twice. And it just gets ridiculously good. And, more back to Twilight Denial, he's a ranger, so you can put No Stranger to the Shadows, so he's reducing Twilight for the sights. So there's a reason why the Prancing Pony is one of probably the most common sight 1, is because Aragorn is really, really good. But there's another thing, which is related to the sight 1, is going first is like the most underrated thing. Because like I said, it's a race. And you're betting at the beginning to see who starts ahead. Which, like, when you are going second, you're on the back pedal from the beginning. You have to really rely heavily on your minions, which can work well if you're Nazgul, because the sight 2 and especially Site 3 for Nazgul are just brutal. Like, if you're a Nazgul deck and you have a Site 2 and a Site 3 that's for your Nazgul, like, I've had a Nazgul deck and had many people concede at Site 2. I don't know if I've ever killed someone at Site 2, but I've crippled them so much that they didn't want to play anymore because they knew they were going to lose, because I killed, like, 2 of their companions that were, like, their main major guys. So that's a big thing. I've mostly been talking about Fellowship this whole time, and not really even talking about individual cards, but that's not really the purpose. I mean, a little bit individual cards, but the main thing is to get the ideas of what you're trying to get. You want to be able to handle the Balrog. You do want some, like, at least a strategy for how you're going to be healing. And a way to not take damage in the first place, but you will always, regardless of who you're going against, take damage eventually at some point. It's gonna happen unless, like, the person's, like, trying to not, or something, and not playing anything on you ever, or their deck is the worst. But you don't want to be planning on them being really bad at the game. That's a horrible plan. You want to plan for them being the best deck that they have, and if you can handle that, then you can handle when it's not as good. So you want to have healing. You want to be have strong people in your Fellowship to be able to handle fights. Another thing that I didn't mention is, how are you protecting Frodo? So at Site 9, they're probably going to send a bunch of guys at you. I've seen, like, people send 20, or not 20, but 10 minions. I know I've played 9 minions on people before, and still lost, even though he had just Frodo and Sam. And the reason for that is because they were both very strong, and one of the strategies is just be like, well, my ring bearer, he's the objective. I'm just going to make him as strong as possible. You're like, okay, well, he's a hobbit. He starts at 3 strength. Okay, he's 4. What, you add Sting to him, he's a 6 now, and you add Elbeth Chthoniel, and he's a 7. That's most people how strong he's going to get by default. But if you throw 4 promises in there, then suddenly he's an 11, and then you put a bunch of events that, like, Hobbit Stealths, Hobbit Intuitions, Dagger Strikes, suddenly he's able to get to really strong high numbers. That's a strategy that my other brother, William, I've been saying my brother, Quincy Morris, he makes videos on this, but I have another brother, William. He really likes to do Hobbit decks. He makes his Frodo just really strong. And then also has Sam, so that's a second ring bearer that you have to take out, which is really hard to do. And that's one way of strategizing it. But in this deck, I have Aragorn, who can deal with that horde of guys because I have archery, which is how I protect Frodo. And that's, you just got to think about how are you handling that. Some people are going to be like, well, I'm going to be defender +1, and you have the other Aragorn that makes you defender +1, or you have Boromir that pulls out allies to be able to handle all the minions that they throw at you. There's a million ways of doing this. This is one reason why I really like Theron, and I feel like he should be in every deck. It's hard for me to, like, think of there ever to be a time when Theron shouldn't be in your deck. It's difficult. The reason is because he's an easy Balrog solution. Like, he handles one of the skirmishes for the Balrog. But unlike Hobbit Stealth that does that, you can play it at Site 1, and then that card is no longer in your hand. You don't have to save it in your hand for Site 5. And then maybe you don't have to use that, and you can save him for Site 9 or something. But just be wary of Site 7 can eat him. But, like, he's really good, and he's not a companion, so he's not adding Twilight every time unless they play the one condition, but we don't need to worry about that. But he's 99% of the time, he's not adding Twilight, other than the one that you played for him, unlike Pippin, who in this deck is one of the potential Balrog solutions. He's adding a Twilight at site 2. He's adding a Twilight at site 3. He's adding a Twilight at site 4. And 5. So he's costing 4 Twilight. This man costs 1. And I'm not adding the first time because I'm starting with him. So those are things you want to think about, which is why this guy's really good. Because he deals with the Balrog solution. He deals with protecting Frodo at the end if you need to do that instead when they hit you with billion minions. So you're like one less minion that has to deal with fighting me. Maybe it's like some Witch King or something, or Cave Troll. And it's like, well, now you're killing Theron instead of Aragorn, who's exhausted or whatever. Like, there's a lot of different ways that he can be helpful. Like, one copy of him in like every deck should be the case. You should always have a version of the Balrog in your deck. There's certain cards that is just like you should always have this. I'm now thinking, it's like, is there ever other card? You should always have some form of sword on Frodo, whether it's a frying pan, a hobbit sword, or sting. And it's hard to argue against having Elbreth the Chthoniel in every deck and one copy of There and Back Again, because it's strength +2 when you need it, which can go on top of the sword, which can go on top of the condition, getting him to a 9 when they're playing a billion cards on you. Also, one bounder probably is also pretty good to have in every deck, because these are all cards that are protecting Frodo. You need some cards to protect Frodo, because he's the objective. And having Sam is one way to be like, okay, if I failed at protecting Frodo, he did some event nonsense and he made me strength -5 because I had 5 burdens, and I was going against and I was going against like a 4 strength or a 5 strength guy, and I was 6 strength and I thought I could win, but now I'm being overwhelmed. Like, random stuff happens. So having Sam is a insurance against that. In my deck, I have Mary as insurance against that specific problem, because then I can exert to make Frodo stronger. There's been so many times when that's happened, and I'm like, well, that's one of the purposes of Mary, in those emergency situations, I can make him stronger. And like, that's a way of getting my guys stronger, so that like, one example is Sam going against Uruk-hai. He's a 9 strength Uruk-hai, and I got nothing on me. Normally he'd be doing 2 damage to Aragorn. I can exert Mary, it's still 2 damage on me, but now you're taking damage, which might be enough to kill you. It's just stuff to think about. You want to win skirmishes, you want to kill their enemies so that you can move on, you want to heal, you want to prevent taking damage in the first place if you can, and you want to mitigate that damage that you take, whether that's archery, whether that's stuff like Mithril Coat. And another thing that I haven't mentioned yet is condition removal. I feel like every deck needs some form of condition removal. Whether that's Bilbo or that's Athelis. And if you think about it, Athelis gets rid of conditions that are on me, and it can only do that. Bilbo gets rid of conditions that are in their support area, and it can only do that. This deck, it's pretty expensive to use Bilbo, but sometimes it's worth it. Like, because all of these conditions are useful. It's like, am I getting rid of There and Back Again to get rid of your condition? Am I getting rid of Elbreth Chthoniel? Like, that's strength on my Ringbearer. Am I getting rid of a vitality on Legolas? Am I getting rid of 2 archery wounds that I can throw at you? Like, all of those things. And if I had nothing conditions that aren't worth anything, it's like, why is it in my deck? So I'm not saying you should put Bilbo in your deck. There's plenty of ways to get rid of conditions. One of the best ways is if you're running Elf Allies. This card is just really good. Exert an Elf Ally to discard a condition or 2 conditions if you spot an orc. Like, that just turns off and it turns off Moria. And it's still good against Nazgul. It's just 1 condition at that point, but this is in the maneuver phase. So if you do it when you're not moving on anymore, this Twilight, it costs 2, but that's irrelevant. If you play it right, if you moved twice and then play this card, it's completely the cost of this card is irrelevant. Unlike a similar card, this one, which is just worse, it's in the Fellowship phase. There are 2 elves to discard a condition. It's exerting twice. It still doesn't cost Twilight, but like you can get around that with this, and it's an elf ally just once. Like this is basically just a better version of the card. It just takes a little bit of intelligence, and also it's in the maneuver phase, so it allows you, like, let's say they didn't play any conditions in the Fellowship, and you draw this card, but then you move on, and then they play like 3 conditions, and then with that other card, it's only in the Fellowship phase. But now you can get rid of those dangerous conditions, and 2 of them, as opposed to this, which is 1. And this is 1 or 2. Like, certain cards are kind of just better than other cards, in like every way, but most cards are subjective. And a lot of them are situational, like this guy. We'd had an argument about this. I don't think he should be in every deck. He's really good if you're going against orcs, but you're not always going against orcs. This guy's really good if you're going against Uruk-hai. You're not always going against Uruk-hai. You could be like, well, you should put both of them in. Well, if you're doing that, you should be going like full elf ally. There's 2 guys that I do think are decent in most decks. This guy, really good at allowing you to, if you're trying to go from, like, you stopped at site 4 and you're going site 5, then site 6, or if you're going from 3 to 6, like, he's able to deal with that stuff so you can move on, and then he's another guy that's fighting at site 6 to allow you to get that sanctuary, to survive at that sanctuary, and he's doing a wound to them, and their big cave troll can come and eat him and not your companions. So he's pretty solid. And Elrond's decent in any deck. Neither of these guys have any spotting requirements. The site 3 elf allies, almost all of them have spotting requirements. The other Elrond has spotting requirements. You have to spot an elf or Gandalf, but this guy doesn't, and he can be put in any deck. He's really expensive though, so he's still situational. If you've got someone like this man, and he's the only card you're playing, then he's actually only 2 cost. And if you have something like Sting, you can maybe even remove that further, which is why Sting should be in most decks, because it's really good. It's a better version of Hobbit Sword. And my brother William doesn't like putting it in his Hobbit decks. I think he should still put it in his Hobbit decks, but that's just my opinions. Anyway, hopefully you got a good idea of like the general concepts of what you're wanting to build when you're building a Fellowship in your deck. You want to be able to handle the Balrog. You want to be able to win skirmishes. You want to remove their enemies so you can move on faster. You want to heal so that you don't die if you did stupid stuff and you're like, everyone's exhausted and I'm at site 4. Like, what do I do? It's like everything's going wrong. What do I do? It's a helpful thing. Like, not every deck has that, but I feel like every deck should have at least some amount of that. Like, if you're like, oh, I really need Aragorn or something, and having 4 copies of him, well, extra copies heal the person. Like, people that aren't in your starting lineup having extra copies, it's a way. It's not nearly as effective as the way that's in my deck, which one of the parts of this deck that makes it shine is its healing abilities, which I'll just talk about. It has 4 copies of this, 2 play spot 2 elf companions, which is why I have 3 elf companions in my starting lineup. And I don't care about Pippin, but I do very much care about Merry, because I need to have those so I can play this. And once I've played 4 of these, it's not that big of a deal to keep them alive. I mean, it's nice to, but it's a luxury at that point, instead of a necessity, which it is at the beginning until I get these out. And this is, each time you remove a burden, except by a Hobbit's game text, you may heal a companion. So if I get 4 of these out, then this card, which is exert a Hobbit companion to remove a burden, it allows me to move 1 burden, move 1 wound from somebody else and heal 3. So it's kind of weird because I'm exerting a guy, and then I'm removing 4 wounds. So it could be the one that I just moved, so it's a net of removing 3 wounds from the board. But it's like, let's say Aragorn has 4 wounds on him, and that's all I have right now. Well, I can exert Frodo. I can move one of those wounds to Frodo, and then Aragorn is now full health. And it's free. And then I also have Elf Song, Spot an Elf, which is why Legolas is here and why Legolas needs to survive. It's pretty important, is because I spot an elf to remove a burden. It does cost 1, but this, if I have 4 of these, it's a net of 4. It's not the move thing. And then that's a lot of healing. Like, this is basically a sanctuary with 1 card. But it requires me to have these first. So there's some mulligans that happen sometimes. Drawing these at the beginning is actually not really great, but it's still kind of nice and kind of helpful. Because normally I'm not taking that many wounds at site 2 and 3, so like exerting Pippin to remove burdens at the beginning isn't that big of a deal, because 4 burdens is still a little scary because of that 1 Nazgul, and if I'm going against Nazgul, like having a lot of burdens is spooky. But that's another thing, is like, are you planning on going first? And if so, how are you managing to pull that off? How are you able to bet high without just dying? Like, do you have burden removal, which is kind of going to be a subset of healing. It's not nearly as important as healing, but like one of the cards that should be in most decks is Sam, Eater of Burdens. He's not in my deck because I don't need him, because I have other ways of removing burdens. I have Elf Song, I have this, I have major removal of burdens. But in most decks, he should be in them, and that's all the burden removal you need. And then he can eat the burdens and die. Like, that's fine. And if you have this at 1 that pulls Sam out, then suddenly you're able to bet like 5 comfortably. Because having 2 burdens isn't scary. Having 5 burdens is scary. If they bet 6 somehow, and you have 5 burdens, then suddenly you're in a big predicament if you weren't able to get Sam. But you get to know if you're going second before you choose your starting lineup. So there are a few times in weird cases where you will have a different starting lineup if you're going first than if you're going second. I haven't made any decks like that, but my brother did once in a 2 Towers deck that was weird. But yeah, hopefully I've covered most of the basis of what you want to be thinking about when you're making a deck. I'm going to deal with Balrog, win skirmishes, remove enemies, heal, have some removal of burdens. Think about your site 1, because if you're like me and you're like, I need to go first so that I can get my 5 companions out that I want, like, there's a lot of site 1s that pull out companions, not just Aragorn. There's the one that pulls out Sam. There's one that pulls out Merry and Pippin, and I think that's an underutilized site. And like Pippin, this version of Pippin is kind of like a budget version of Sam. He allows me to bet 4 instead of 3, which I think a lot of decks should be betting 3, because you can bet 3, then add 1 with Prancing Pony that puts you at 4, which isn't that dangerous. It allows you to get Aragorn without having to do too many shenanigans to be able to do that. But if you did do that, you should have Sam at least in your deck, so you can remove those burdens. But I feel like I've been rambling. I'm sure like once I stop recording, I'll be like, oh, I forgot to say this like super crucial thing. Think about your sites. And they should synergize with probably mostly your minions and a little bit your fellowship, but mostly your minions. And the reason I say that is because, think about it. When are you playing your sites? It's when they move. That means you are behind. You are only ever playing your sites when you are behind. The one exception to this is site 1, which we're only ever playing with when you were ahead. So, your site 1 should definitely be something that helps your fellowship, always. And every other site should probably be something that helps your minions most of the time. The exceptions to that is if you're somehow able to play your site with either your fellowship is able to play your own sites, or you have that Nazgul that can play those sites, and you're trying to do some weird shenanigans or something. But you're like, oh, well, this helps your fellowship. Well, this allows me to catch up. So it does help my fellowship, and it does help their fellowship. But if they went first, and they made it all the way to Site 3, and then I'm going, and I'm probably going to stop at Site 3, but hopefully I'm going to be able to stop them at Site 4 or 5, because I'm Moria. So hopefully I can do that. And then suddenly, well, now they're at 4, I'm at 3, or they're at 5 and I'm at 3. If I can make it to Site 6, then suddenly I'm ahead of them. They could make it to Site 7, but now they have this question, like, they can't really afford that, and hopefully I can punish them. Or they do stop at Site 6, and now I'm ahead. So that's the things you want to think about. It's like, who is this site helping? And I think in the tournament game, I explained why my Site 8 is this instead of the other one. But you can watch that video if you haven't seen it. It's this deck. It actually doesn't have Last Alliance of Men and Elves, or these 2 elves, and I added this guy, and this guy. That's the change that this has to that tournament deck. Because I realized that these elves are good. While I do have a lot of healing in this deck, I was like, well, having Elrond is too much healing, but he heals in the regroup phase, and all of my other healing heals in the fellowship phase, which is why I added him. And he fights at Site 3. So if stuff happens, like they have Nazgul and I happen to draw him at the beginning, maybe he'll allow me to move on to Site 3, but probably still not going to do that. But still, it can be helpful to have a guy that fights at Site 3 and a guy that fights at Site 6. For this deck, that might make sense. And then it allows Aragorn to have the potential of getting to a 14 strength. And then because Mary can add a strength to other people, that puts it to the potential of, like, I was doing the math, like, he can beat the Balrog. Because if Mary with the Hobbit sword, with there and back again, with this thing, it can get really high numbers, which is nice. Anyway, this video is probably so long that no one's going to watch it, but hopefully, if you did need this help, then my rambling was helpful. I would like to think that I do know what I'm talking about. I've played this deck specifically a lot, and I think it has like a 75-80% win rate or something like that. If I'm guesstimating stuff, you'd be like, oh, look at the stats in the thing, and I always change the names and change the cards in there, because I'm always adapting, always changing. I'll probably leave with this. You might think that Lord of the Rings cards is a versus game, and in some ways it is, but the way I treat the game is like it's a co-op game, and you're like, what in the world is going on with this? I am trying to make the best deck that I possibly can. And I enjoy that process. One of the things that I like the most about Lord of the Rings cards is just the deck building part of the game. I like making decks. I like refining decks. That's my favorite part. I have so many decks. How many decks have I built? A lot. I've made a lot of decks. A lot of these are the same versions of the same deck. Just like, because I will play a game, and I'll be like, what worked, what didn't? And then I'll refine it. I'll tweak it. I'll be like, oh, well, I demolished this person. I don't see anything to change. Okay. Then I play again, and then someone beats me. I'm like, okay, why did I lose? Did I lose because I did stupid stuff, or was it the deck's fault? So that's why I'm like, I have different categories of how I calculate this. Like this, 2 of these losses, these are losses, but they were because I did something really stupid that caused me to lose, like not noticing that he had an Elrond. So I spent 3 of my Goblin Armories stopping their wounds which if he didn't have an Elrond, I would have killed him and like won the game. Because he had an Elrond that we were at site 3, then it did nothing, and then I lost like my entire engine off of nothing, and then like I couldn't do anything to him basically the rest of the game. Like stuff like that. That's like, that wasn't the deck's fault. It was me being a dum-dum. So, and I calculate that for reasons because I'm like, I want to make the deck better. And then the games where I lose and it was the deck's fault, it's like I did everything. Like I couldn't think of any mistakes that I did in playing the deck. Then I'm like, okay, what do I need to change? What was failing, what was not? And I'm like, when I play someone, it's not like I'm wanting them to be bad at it, or like I want them to have a good deck. And with me, it's like, it's not like I'm wanting people to be like, oh, they don't know what's in my deck, so I can beat them. It's like, no, I want you to know what's in my deck. I want you to beat my deck. I want you to look at this and analyze it and be like, I will crush this thing. And I can't wait to play Void Ninja because I'm going to demolish his face. I'm going to bet 5 and I'm going to, like, because like, I want people to play me because I always bet 4 with this deck. I want to see what happens when people bet 5 because it's happened like once. And that person did beat me because like 95% of the time I'm going first. So I didn't have that variable to test. And then I was like, okay, I need to change some things. Like for a while, I only had 1 copy of Aragorn, and I was like, wait a second. While that, in all of the times when I've been testing, has been fine because I've gone first. What if I go second? I'm relying on drawing 1 copy of Aragorn. Sure, it's a kind of smallish deck, but like, it's bigger now. But that's not the good thing. And I'm like, okay, well, how many of these cards can I not play unless I have Aragorn? I have 6 cards that I can't play. 2 cards that do nothing unless I have Aragorn, but I can still play them. I'm relying on 1 card. That's really dumb. So that's why I have at least 2 of him in. So stuff like that it's like, I want to test it. I want to play people that are going to beat me. And have things that counter what I have so that I can adapt to that. That's the reason why I'm not as enthusiastic about cards like, anything that's like specifically against a certain kind of minion type. Because it's like, this won't help me in every game. Unless like, I've been like, okay, I've lost like 3 times to Yorukai. I'm like super weak to Yorukai. Then at that point, you're like, okay, I need to patch up in this one specific area. But like this guy is good because it's minion. Sure, it's group phase, but like, yeah, this guy's better against Yorukai than this guy is. So it's those kinds of balances that you want to think about to make your deck as good as possible so that it can win regardless of what minions are coming at you. And only when you're like, I'm losing against this one kind of minion, do you start supplementing stuff like this guy or this guy. Unless you have a deck that like utilizes it. Like if you have an Elf Ally deck and you have 4 copies of the Galadriel that allows you to play your Elf Allies for free, then sure, have all of the Elf Allies that you want. But I've been rambling. Thank you for listening to this. If you're interested in seeing more videos from me talking about this game, let me know. I didn't cover the minions at all. Minions are a bit simpler. Like 95% of my thinking process for making decks is about the Fellowship. And you might be like, what? That seems super lopsided. And the reason is because the Fellowship, you have to like have synergy. Like I could just randomly pick minions. Just be like, Moria, this, well, that's not, okay. I get this guy. I'll just throw him in there. He has synergy with orcs. But it was like, okay, I put him in a deck and it's like, well, it's not the worst. Like you can still there's a lot more forgiveness for your minions. You could have a mix. Normally, it's better to have monoculture and have a few Nazgul in pretty much any deck. But like minions are really simple. They don't require as much thought, because like when I'll switch over to my good cards deck. Every time, like, we had a video with David, and it's almost impossible to talk about the Fellowship without being like, oh, well, you have this synergy. Well, you have that synergy. And it's like, oh, this card in and of itself, by itself, is good. Okay. How many of these cards by itself is good? Is Airborne Sword by itself good? Well, Airborne by himself is good. Is Airborne Sword by itself good? No. So that shouldn't be here. Neither should this. 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 How many cards is that? 23 cards. And we can add those two elf allies here that are actually good by themselves. This guy and this man. This guy by himself, they added him. Well, we have to have Gandalf or an elf by himself. Does not qualify. Build a Pony does qualify. He can be put on your Hobbit because you have a Hobbit. Boromir by himself is good because he can handle the Balrog. Him by himself is good because he's an 8/2 cost, 4 vitality. It's ridiculous. This guy by himself, he can splash, kill the stuff. Like, this guy by himself is good because you're always going to have burdens and you're always going to be betting, and he can also take the ring and all that. This guy by himself is good. Like, all these cards by themselves are good. This is very situational, but it's still maybe good, but maybe not, actually. But, like, that's not many cards. And a deck that has these cards isn't necessarily going to be that solid. This is actually also really situational. And build a Pony with Underground Sights, you're normally dropping an Underground Sight. Maybe not. Like, at a certain point, you're like, there's not actually that many cards that are universally always good. Where it's always going to be beneficial to have this card in your deck. This card, oh, it requires you to have another Hobbit. That doesn't qualify. Like, you're like, well, you should have this guy. But by itself, like, how many cards are viable by itself? But, going to the minions, this minion, by itself, in any deck, probably decent. He's an inferior version in every way of this card, but he's still good. This card, best minion in the game. Often more scary than the Cave Troll. I mean, the Balrog. Cave Troll is probably more scary than this guy, but harder to pull off. Because where you have to go by itself, like a card by itself that is solid. Him by himself is good. He can snipe the Sam that just ate 3 burdens. Side 2, killing Sam, really strong. He can be a strength buff on any other card, because if you have any other card in your deck, doesn't matter what it is, that's a minion. Like, if you don't, like, he's a buff to anything, any deck is strong. This guy gets rid of their cards in their hand that can be helpful. It's maybe one of the weaker ones. This guy, it's maybe more situational, shouldn't be there. This guy by himself, if they moved on, he's 9 strength 2 cost, not bad. This is an 11 strength 2 cost, probably just better version of this guy. Getting rid of their elf conditions by himself, like, they're gonna have elf conditions oftentimes, and if they didn't, well, it's just a 1 cost guy that didn't take up much space in your hand, and you can get rid of him. This guy gets rid of this man that should be in every deck, which is why this guy should be in most decks. This guy by himself is really good. Like, it's easier to have minions. They're simpler. This card should be in most decks. And I guess I'd just say, like, generally you want to pick a culture and have a minimum of, if you're going to go that culture and have cards that buff that culture, have a minimum of half of the cards. It depends on which culture, but half of them should probably be minions. At least. Nazgul, since they're thicker, heavier, they can have less than half, but you still want to be careful with those ratios and be aware of what those ratios are, so you can adjust them and tweak them and be like, oh, I didn't have enough Nazgul, or I had too many Nazgul, and I had too many cards in my hand. Like, play with that adjustment, play with those numbers, play with all of that, and have sites that buff your minions. Yeah. Hopefully you found this helpful, and did not find my rambling annoying. Thank you for watching. God bless.